I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media, and today on the Crypto Coin Show we have Seamus Rocca, the CEO of Xapo Bank. Seamus, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me, Ashton. Good to be here.
Very welcome. Excited to dive into your insights into Bitcoin, blockchain industry, and Xapo, and what you and your team have been working on for many years. I'd love if you could just give us a quick intro on yourself and Xapo. From what I'm aware, you've been around for quite a long time, more than a few cycles, and still doing very well. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that, and then we can dive into all the details.
Sure. So, like you said, I'm CEO of Xapo Bank. Xapo Bank has been around for about 10 years. Started as a Bitcoin custodian back in 2013 and a Bitcoin wallet. And then we evolved over time. We added an e-money company to the Bitcoin aspect of the business. We then introduced the world's first Bitcoin card back in 2017 that very quickly got shut down. And we continued with the business. And we very quickly realized that, most of our customers were around emerging markets. The use case seemed to resonate a lot more in emerging markets. And we also found that most people would sort of load funds and then very quickly either buy Bitcoin or keep it in dollars. Mm-hmm. So that gave us this idea of becoming a bank, offering a dollar bank account to people all over the world who want a strong currency. In emerging markets, you've got local currencies that very much tend to devalue against the US dollar. The US dollar is by far the strongest currency, in the world. International trade is settled in dollars. And in my view, it will remain the main sort of currency for trade for the foreseeable future. So this combination of having a dollar bank account offshore that pays interest and is essentially a savings account, married together with Bitcoin, which is a store of value, would allow customers to have, financial freedom. This idea that I can choose what I want to do with my money. If I'm worried about country risk, I'm worried about inflation, I'm worried about governments printing more money. Mm-hmm. There's this bank out there that allows us to keep our money there. And, this sounds great on paper, Ashton, but I can assure you that doing it in practice is much harder than it sounds. So, building a bank from scratch is difficult to do at the best of times. Doing it when half of your business or the other leg of the business of this dollar account is a Bitcoin account is even harder. So we've spent the last few years, connecting to SWIFT, getting banking license, becoming principal members of Visa, MasterCard, getting correspondent banks, getting money market accounts, getting all of our risk profiling set up. Really, building the product and the bank from scratch has been a big challenge. So we've been doing that for the last few years. And now we're back. And we're back at a very interesting time in the market where a lot of people don't trust traditional banks. But after FTX, there's a bit of concern around exchanges and, how they segregate their funds. And I think that Xapo is in the perfect sweet spot in the middle of those two.
Yeah, it is a very interesting time right now, and especially post 2020, when we started to see more inflation on emerging markets, as well as you mentioned, that a lot of those citizens are turning to Bitcoin, and it would be great for them to have some place. Say they're somewhere in Latin America or they're somewhere in Africa or Europe, some singular place where they can go and get a bank account or get access to Bitcoin. I feel like because since the inflation in 2020, it is more and more a critical time right now. And I'm curious on how you and your team were approaching, Xapo is back at this perfect time where, how do you put yourselves in, it's tough, to cater to all countries, but like the perfect timing to launch so that people can easily onboard and use the platform regardless of which country they're in.
Sure. So I think that's one of the advantages of starting being a Bitcoin wallet first. Because if you think about, what do we love about Bitcoin? The fact that it's, not only digital, but it's sovereign. It's not controlled by any one country or regulated in only one country. It lives on the internet. It's fully digital, right? The fact that nobody can decide to print more of it. So you don't have to worry about, central bank intervention. So the fact that it can't be controlled from that perspective is another factor. And then obviously the fact that it's safe, the fact that it's secure, think about the hash rate of the database and what have you, it's by far the most secure out of all the blockchains. So when you combine all those things, it's very much the perfect use case for a store of value. And then you go, well, how are you going to have people access this? So this idea of creating a bank that would give you access to Bitcoin means that you needed to create a bank that was as close to all those attributes of Bitcoin as you could find. So therefore, the closest thing that we could find to this idea of being sovereign is an offshore bank. As in, rather than have a bank that is regulated in 50 countries, we're regulated in one country. And when you open up a bank account with us, you're essentially opening up a bank account in this jurisdiction, as opposed to in your home jurisdiction. So therefore, you're minimizing country risk. When you think about, store of value, if you're worried about inflation devaluation, well, what is the currency that most people in the world seek when they look to go to, a strong flight to quality currency? Well, it's not the yuan because it's a closed economy. It's not the euro, and it's not sterling. If you think about, the euro was negative interest rates for a very long time, and now with the invasion of Ukraine, you got to almost expect that Europe is going to have to play a big part in the rebuilding of that when the war will stop one day. And after Brexit, the pound is just not strong enough. The economy isn't big enough. So the US dollar will remain the currency of choice for emerging markets and for trade for the foreseeable future. And that's why we chose the dollar. And the idea of the savings account is because we felt that went hand in hand with what Xapo was, which is somewhere to keep your Bitcoin safe. So this idea of, what do we want to do on the dollar side? Well, it's a savings account. Rather than just have a wallet that transacts in dollars, we want to allow people to earn interest and grow their wealth. So if you're the type of person that thinks about Bitcoin investment longer term, then those are the kind of customers that are attracted to Xapo, somewhere where you can keep your investment longer term. And if you're thinking about a dollar account, it's a savings account as opposed to a daily wallet. So this idea of our value proposition came from, we were born as a Bitcoin custodian that then actively sought regulation and then wanted to build a bank that was best suited for Bitcoin rather than the other way around.
Great point. And with these, offshore banks or banks that are in specific countries that are very favorable, often you hear that, at least from North America, that the high net worth individuals are the ones that are, have access to offshore or to these different banks that are just better suited, but not everyone has the privilege, traditionally of getting access to those. And when you talk about emerging countries and giving them access, it seems there's a wider range of clientele, some of them maybe even unbanked or underbanked. Is there a range of clientele that uses Xapo, and can people that are unbanked get a bank account through Xapo as like their first account?
Yeah, so let me go to the first point first, which is this idea of private banking, offshore banking has always been perceived as something that is only accessible to rich people. So, think about the traditional Swiss bank account offshore. You need a minimum of like $10 million to be able to open up an account and get your, relationship manager and what have you. And then, of course, you're going to get, good investment and wealth advice. But you need to be a millionaire, and that's beyond most people. So for us, thinking about who is our, target audience, if it's people in emerging markets, if you have $20,000, $30,000 of savings in Indonesia or Argentina or Brazil, you're doing really well for yourself. But a private bank would never look at you. Your assets under management are not big enough. So we felt that, we can very much capture that market as being an offshore proposition that doesn't just have to be for the ultra rich and ultra wealthy. Having said that, though, when we first started Xapo, this idea of being able to facilitate having accounts for the unbanked was very much what we wanted to do. But what we found was that, well, in a country, you first had to figure out how to go from fiat to Bitcoin, and therefore that's best done by people who can serve those customers locally in country. So 10 years ago when we started, that didn't exist. So we were very much at the forefront on trying to facilitate that. But now what we find is that the crypto space has evolved a lot, and you're seeing a lot of crypto providers in country that are better, that can better serve those people that are unbanked. For us, it's more about, well, if we're a savings proposition, you need to have, more than a couple of $1,000s in your account for you to earn enough interest to justify the cost of having the account.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And you mentioned about having a long-term perspective on Bitcoin. I know Xapo's already been around for 10 years, which relative to Bitcoin is long-term, but I feel like this is an asset that could be around for centuries. So some say we're very early still. And one of the things that happens with a lot of people is they overtrade their Bitcoin, or they give it to somebody that was going to give them high yield, like Celsius, and all of a sudden the third party is taking their Bitcoin or it's gone. So it's of utmost importance to preserve your Bitcoin in somewhere that's secure. And I know that you would understand that as well. And it's even questionable with the hardware wallets nowadays, with Ledger coming up with these updates and other ones that are sort of connected to the internet, whether your funds can be totally secure. I'm curious on your take on that and Xapo's take on securing the Bitcoin and how to ensure that you can put it somewhere and come back in 10 years and ensure that it's there.
Yeah. Well, look, I think, first of all, let's talk about the sort of the investment time period. So one of the things that we see is that how people in sort of first world economies view Bitcoin and crypto is very different to how people view it in emerging economies. So people in the US, Europe, the UK, maybe even North Asia will very much be thinking about a trading opportunity, how to make money. So you're trading crypto and you're seeing it as an asset class where through trading you can become rich, right? So you're basically taking a punt on multiple coins. In the emerging world, if you're in Argentina, Venezuela, Ukraine, Nigeria, Lebanon recently, anywhere that has sort of financial or geopolitical issues at a kind of quite an extreme level, Bitcoin is life-saving. All of a sudden, you have an asset class that can be a genuine store of value. And even though the price is volatile, I mean, we can't say that it isn't. It is quite volatile. Like you say, it's still early days. And that volatility in those markets is not as terrible as the alternative. So you think, well, what do I want? Do I want a volatile asset class in Bitcoin, but that I know is secure and that is digital and nobody can confiscate it? Or do I want my local currency, which the central bank could, lock up, confiscate, don't have access to your own bank account? So, that would be the first point. That I think that in the emerging world, people view Bitcoin in particular as more of a genuine store of value that has that you want to keep your hands on, right? And I think very much in modern economies, it's much more of a, dare I say, gambling, but much more of a trading asset class. There are exceptions, of course, don't get me wrong. And there are people who are, Bitcoin maximalists, and that's perfectly fine. And their view will be, not your keys, not your coins. From our perspective, from where we stand at Xapo, that's just bad advice. I wouldn't walk around with a suitcase full of dollar bills, no matter how good the lock of the suitcase is, right? When Bitcoin was at $100, if you got a couple of hundred Bitcoin in a pen drive, you probably, if you lost it, it wouldn't be a big deal. But if you have 20 Bitcoin now at $30,000 a Bitcoin, that's a serious amount of money to be carrying around with you on essentially what is a suitcase with a lock. If you lose the suitcase or you forget the lock number, you lose your money, right? So what do most moderate people do is they put their money in a bank. Now, trusts of banks is in short supply because we see banking crises and what have you. But most people will still figure out, well, how can I keep my money in a bank or whatever. So on the bank side, what we do is say, look, we don't lend. We don't offer mortgages. So 100% of your money is with Xapo Bank. We invest it in money markets and treasuries less than 3 months, super short tenor. We earn 5% out of that, and we pay you 4%. So we keep a small amount. That's how we make money. We're honest and transparent about it. But for you, it's pretty much risk-free. So on the Bitcoin side, it's a little bit the same. We've been around for 10 years because at one point in time, we were the largest custodian of Bitcoin in the world. We're well known for our bunkers and how we keep the Bitcoin secure. And essentially what we're saying to our customers is, we keep your coin secure so you don't have to. In the same way as you can sleep at night, know that you don't have to worry about the fact that you have a suitcase full of cash under your bed. You don't have to worry about the security of your Bitcoin. We're experts at that, and we do it for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And with the Bitcoin that is stored in Xapo, so users there's no locking. Like you can just put it in and get it out at any time.
Yep, that's right. So even though it's a savings account, it's on demand. So whether it's your Bitcoin or whether it's your dollars, you can take it out at any time. And you see, for a normal bank, that would normally be a problem. Because if you can take your money out on demand, there's less money for them to be able to lend on mortgages. So they've got to look at all the ratios of how much lending you can do and look at the risk profile and whatever else. We don't have that problem because our business model isn't lending, because our business model is this idea of having an offshore account where people can have a savings account and grow the balance sheet. So, given that that's what we do, we don't carry that risk. So as a result, we can just say to people, look, we've got your money, it's in short tenor money market assets and whatever else, and that's how we keep it safe. And on the Bitcoin side, it's the same. You can withdraw your Bitcoin at any time. So even though we've got them secure, we have a liquidity pool, and then we've got the rest of it in cold storage, but we actively manage that liquidity pool. So we always have your Bitcoin, and therefore from that perspective, we can provide you access to your Bitcoins whenever you need them.
Great to hear. And right now inside of the US with some of the banks failing and some people saying this is just the beginning of a cascading effect of banks that may fall in the near future, I feel like this is a great time for Americans that have quite a bit of money in the bank and they've trusted banks for decades, that they might be looking at Bitcoin or other opportunities for offshore banks or other places that might be safer than the American banking system. What do you feel? How do you feel Xapo can benefit from this situation, and is there any way that you see it playing out?
Yeah, well, look, we took a business decision a few years ago to actually not serve US customers, because the moment you serve US customers, you're pretty much caught by US regulation, right? Yeah. And we had a business in the US, and we could see the direction of travel that regulation was going in, and we took an early view that the world is a big place, and serving the rest of the world is big enough, and we thought we'd leave the US to the US, and in hindsight, that was probably a really good decision. I think that, is there going to be an incentive for people in the US to take their Bitcoin offshore? Well, look, if the regulator is really putting the clamps on your more reputable crypto providers, then that might end up having to be an option. It's a shame that it's gotten to that, but, if heaven forbid that, there was drastic action taken around Coinbase or any of the big providers, it would be a tough position for people in the US to be in. What I think is interesting is actually Hong Kong opening up to retail customers, because of course Hong Kong doesn't do anything without the approval of China, and Hong Kong is a very well-established offshore financial center. Is it going to attract Americans? I don't know, but it certainly provides an opportunity for the more sort of traditional financial players finding a large jurisdiction that is welcoming towards crypto and Bitcoin in particular. That would be fascinating to see how that evolves. So for me, I think Hong Kong is one to watch. Of course, the only downside to that is, countries and regulators tend to flip-flop on Bitcoin. It's become politicized almost. One day China decided to stop all crypto, and now they're opening up in Hong Kong. What is there to say that they're not going to flip-flop again? We might have a Republican, president and government come in after the next election, and that might, the US might go back. Who knows? But all of that uncertainty is certainly not good for crypto in general. But my advice would be, keeping your Bitcoin in a suitcase with a lock under your bed is probably not a good idea.
Yeah, great advice. And I feel like with the US and with Canada as well, it seems like the regulators are clamping down on exchanges and on-ramps and off-ramps and making it harder for Americans that have a lot in the bank to actually get Bitcoin anywhere.
Yeah.
Do you see that as something that it's negative for the cryptocurrency space as a whole, or as you said, it's only a few 100 million people out of the billions and billions in the world. The people that really want it will move elsewhere, or find other ways to get access to these assets.
I think, we've seen quite a few crypto waves, and Bitcoin waves in particular. And I think that with any Bitcoin wave, there's always, a couple of things that create a catalyst for it to, start shooting up. Given the state of the world economy at the moment, given the uncertainty of regulation in the US, but also more importantly, like you said, the shutting down of a lot of the providers of dollar rails to the crypto companies, that means that it's going to make it quite hard for us to see new users in the space. So the people who are already in crypto have already got their Bitcoin, stable coins, Ether, whatever they have. So those that believe, in inverted commas, are unlikely to cash in anytime soon. So they'll stay in the space. But without new money coming into the system, without new adopters, it is going to be challenging. Now, even though the US wasn't the only country in the world that where this is true, I think that the US dollar was a big sort of liquidity tool to be used by all the crypto space. So even though we don't serve the US, Xapo was affected by the fact that a lot of the US banks that touched crypto were shut down. So we had to shut down our sort of, dollar Swift service, for example. We've got other currencies, we offer sterling and euros, but shutting down dollars was a huge hit to the business. We still do stable coins. So we do USDC and USDT, but, I'd be lying if I said that, of course, if we had ACH or Swift in dollars, it would help grow the size of the pie. So I think that, it has affected it in the short term. And I think that it'll be interesting to see what are the catalysts for the next wave. Is it going to come from emerging markets and people, as the economies around the world, as inflation becomes a bigger issue and currencies devalue, are they going to find alternative ways of getting their hands on Bitcoin? We'll see. But from a Xapo perspective, we surely hope so.
Yeah. Now, with Bitcoin where it's at right now, the 2022 days of a year of straight downward price action is over, and we saw quite a rally in the beginning of 2023. But right now we're sort of in a sideways, downward slightly price action, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of hype or interest from new entrants, which is usually a good time to buy, when no one's talking about Bitcoin. But on the other hand, following the Bitcoin network's metrics and the hash rate mining, the introduction of some of these NFT style ordinals, new token standards, I feel like there's a lot of fundamentals that are growing in Bitcoin, despite what the price says. I'm curious if you follow along with Bitcoin's underlying fundamentals or the network versus the price, and where you sort of see that going in the next, moving up to the halving.
Yeah, well, I think a little bit like what we were talking about before. I think the people who are already believe in Bitcoin and the value of Bitcoin are very much gonna just stay, hodl, see it through the halving, and as a result, I think that's what's keeping the fundamentals strong. The fact that there are less rails to get access to Bitcoin also means that it's harder to get out of Bitcoin. So from that perspective, that's also helping those fundamentals and keeping them strong. So it's a really good thing to see that the fundamentals are strong. The price, it's still volatile, but it seems to be in a good place, in between 25, 30,000, and probably stay in that range for a while. I think whether it's a good time to buy or sell Bitcoin also always depends on your point of view.
Mm-hmm.
If you are of the view that Bitcoin is going to go to 100,000 in 2 years, buying now might not be a bad thing. And if it goes down in price, it doesn't matter because you've got a medium to longer term view.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking to trade and trying to make money in the next couple of months because you think Bitcoin is cheap and it might go up, that's probably not good advice. So I think it depends on your view on timelines and also your risk appetite. I think a small allocation of your wealth in Bitcoin, something that you can afford to lose, might not be a bad idea if you have a medium to longer term perspective. If you have a short term perspective, then whether you're buying Bitcoin or any other asset class, it's no different to buying a stock because you like that particular stock and you're taking a gamble. In the short term, it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen. It's much easier to do in the medium to longer term, which is the fundamentals are strong, interest remains high. I think it's very difficult to argue now that Bitcoin and crypto are not to be taken seriously. I think those days are gone. So as a result, from that perspective, I'm very bullish in the medium to long term.
Mm-hmm.
In the short term, it's very difficult to predict. But if you think about world economies and inflation, concerns, geopolitical issues, it's hard to see a world where in the next 18 months, things aren't going to be more of the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it all depends on the cyclical nature of economies. And I think it'll come to a point that as and when economies start to improve, people start to get a little bit more confident about the future, their jobs, where growth might be coming from. I think that's when Bitcoin will see another wave.
Yeah, great perspective, Seamus. I would say the same. If you don't believe, if you're only looking in the short term, then you don't really believe in the fundamentals of what Bitcoin is, because Bitcoin's it's not meant to be around for 2 years and disappear. It's meant to be the future. So I think those medium to long term people, that's where the conviction is. So I'm looking forward to that, and just looking at the approximate 4-year cycles that we've seen with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
If you're not looking at least 4 years out, then you're trying to follow some get rich quick scheme that's going to get you rich.
You're trading. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, there's a massive difference in my view between if you forget about Bitcoin for a second, just think about traditional financial services that have been around for years, right? Some people trade and some people invest.
Yeah.
Right. So if you think about Warren Buffett, he's a well-known investor. Right? And he'll talk about the fundamentals and think about his portfolio, and people will follow him religiously. But he's an investor; he's not a trader, right? When you're looking at trading, you have a very different view of different assets because you've got a much shorter view of how you're going to make money. So I think for those who want to trade, good luck. Each to their own. For me, I think of Bitcoin more from an investment perspective than I do a trading perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And looking forward to that medium to long term with Xapo, I'm curious, what's the vision for expanding the operations and looking forward to, new services or new clients? What's the vision over the medium term?
Sure. Well, look, I think over the short to medium term, our goal right now is to kind of let the world know that we're back. Like I was saying before, we spent 3 years building this bank. It hasn't been easy, but now that we're back, we kind of need to the world know that we're back and what are we about? What is our service? What do we offer? So creating brand awareness and having customers, giving them good service, and getting them to tell their friends that, hey, this is a great product out there called Xapo, right? That's the sort of short to medium term goal, and really grow our balance sheet. For us, it's not so much about having millions and millions of customers. It's just really about, having people trust us with their savings. So trust in financial services is very important. And as a result, we need to build that trust. And the best way to build trust is by creating, a good followership of customers that love your product, because they see value in the product. So that's sort of the medium-term goal. Where we go after that, well, if you think about the traditional offshore banking space is really about wealth management. You've got this idea of, okay, I've got my savings in this account. Well, how can this wealth service help me grow my wealth? And that might be facilitating the investment opportunities for customers.
Yeah, no, that's an exciting next step, and I think that sounds like a perfect plan. Obviously security and safety and reputation should come first, and then, hey, this is the best place to store my Bitcoin. Maybe there's opportunities to, for a little bit of higher growth or more conservative.
Yeah. Well, I think, if you, going back to what we were saying about trading and investing, if you want to trade, you're better suited by going to an exchange. If you have more of the investor mindset, particularly around Bitcoin, or just in general to your investment approach, then Xapo is probably a better place for you. So if you come to Xapo with your Bitcoin, you probably have more of an investment longer term, medium to longer term mindset. So as a result, the product suite that we want to build is geared towards, investors, people who want a wealth manager, and that, in the digital world can come in many different guises. So, I don't want to give too much away about what's coming because, it's I don't want to, remove the thrill of the reveal. But we're working a lot on beyond just being a savings proposition on offering other types of investment products.
Mm-hmm. Very exciting, Seamus. And what is the best way for people to learn more and to get an account started at Xapo?
Sure, xapobank.com. So just if you visit the website, you'll get a lot of information about what we are, what we do, and our service. You can get information about our licenses and whatever else. In the crypto space, a lot of people say they're a crypto bank when they're not a bank. We are an actual bank with a license and capital and whatever else. So you can see all of that on the website, and of course you can apply for an account on the website. So what we do is, because we're a bank, we've got to look at the suitability of the customer. We're going to make sure that this is product that you're going to find value in. So, we ask people questions about, their investment appetite and their source of wealth. So, but once they've filled out the application, it's a pretty seamless and easy process to follow.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all the insights into Bitcoin. I love the longer term perspective. I think that's much more rational than zooming into the 2-minute chart and looking at the volatility, because it's not going to help anybody. So I really do appreciate it. It's a breath of fresh air. Seamus, I will leave the links to Xapo in the description box below, and I would love to follow up in the near future. Maybe we can talk about some of those future reveals in our next episode. But until then, let's follow up in the near future.
Thanks, Ashton. Looking forward to it.